Ruth, such a beautiful story. Just 4 short chapters, but there's just so much into it. And so, in just 2 20, 25-minute messages last Sunday and this Sunday, it doesn't unpack anything, doesn't unpack everything, but I'm hoping that we can unpack some things that will just help us to be drawn to it. So I'm drawn to the story of Ruth, and like many other stories of the Bible, just over and over again, and they're always new some way. Somehow God always gives you some kind of new insight, new thought. So we've been, last week and this week, we've just been thinking about this idea. What we read in Ruth, what we read in the world that we live in, is that we all live broken stories, comma. That doesn't have to be the end. We all live broken stories, comma. God is so good. Right now, God is so good. Before any of our broken stories began, God is so good. When he spoke those wonderful words back in Exodus a few thousand years ago, that he is the Lord, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, that's just so good. Description of who God is. It was true before he spoke those words. It's true now. It's true when there's things that just break us. And we live in such a broken world in so many ways. Thanks for being first responders. Thanks for being firefighters. When things break, we have systems for people to come and try to help us. Why do we have police? Why do we have a military? Why do we have hospitals? Why do we have car mechanics? Why do we have all kinds of things that in this world that we live, we have grocery stores because we run out of food. We don't want to go hungry. And so they're just, you think about this world that we live in, and there's just so many things that exist because of our brokenness. God is so good. Again, oftentimes you'll hear someone say when there's a difficult tragedy, how can people face this kind of tragedy when they don't believe in God? Sometimes because we all live these broken stories, we think that how can God be good because we live all these broken stories? But God is so good in our broken stories. He doesn't leave us alone in our broken stories. He comes. Her name is Erica. It was the last Sunday of January 2018. And we sang beautiful things. She stood up and she raised her hands. Again, the song starts off, all this pain. There isn't one of us in this room this morning that is not familiar with pain. But we know that there are so many different levels of pain. I don't see your level of pain. You don't see my level of pain. There are some people that have such a level of pain. And so we sang this song, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life could really change at all. In all this earth, all our broken stories, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up out of this ground at all? Broken, 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 broken. God is so good. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. Again, the next verse has some more broken all around. Hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found in you. And only God has the power to make us new. We can fix our cars. We can fix our homes. We can clear trees that have fallen after a huge storm. We can do all kinds of things to try to get some of the brokenness out of our lives. But God is the only one that can make us new, like we really want to be made new. So a couple of days after that Sunday in January, Erica left this world. A few days later on a Saturday, with our broken hearts, we gathered and we sang beautiful things and we read scriptures and we talked about how our hearts are broken, her heart was broken, but somehow in that broken heart there was a beautiful flower. When you walked in this morning, you saw this painting. When I first saw this painting hanging in the Otto household, and the tears. You see the cross. Cross is always present in our broken stories. You see the beautiful heart, but yet it's cracked and it's broken. But out of it, that beautiful flower. And that's what God does over and over and over again. We all live broken stories. God is so good. So let's speak these words together, please. We all live broken stories. God is so good. To each one of us here this morning, he's so good. He knows our brokenness. He knows the brokenness that is coming that we don't even know. But he wants to give us this kind of faith that he is so good. So today you're going to hear from the news, broken, 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 broken. We know there's going to be another shooting. We know there's going to be another drowning. We know there's going to be something that's going to break, maybe out there, but maybe something in here. God is so good. So the story of Ruth, again, oftentimes we can read the Bible and we always want to get kind of to that happy ending. Again, all the movies that we watch, as we know, it's not a good story unless there's some kind of brokenness in it, unless there's some kind of tension in it, but then somehow that tension could be resolved. And so we oftentimes, though, we want to rush to that, we from the fairy tale, we want to get to that happy ever after. And we can do that in Ruth, but again, those first 5 verses, I mean, they're in Bethlehem. We know a good thing, a thing that changes the world happens in Bethlehem. But before that story happens, there's a brokenness. And Elimelech and Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, leave Bethlehem and go to Moab. And while in Moab, the 2 sons marry Ruth and Orpah. But then Elimelech dies, the dad dies. And Mahlon dies, and then Chilion dies, and here's this poor, destitute widow who knows hunger. And she's one of God's chosen people, the Israelites. And she hears from some travelers and that, hey, there's good harvest happening in Bethlehem once again. So she decides, I don't want to live here among these foreigners. My husband's gone. My 2 sons are dead. So she leaves and goes back, and Ruth goes with her, not having any hope, but just going to be with her. So last week I told you that this beautiful story in these 4 chapters, there's so many things to it. Again, sometimes we'll think, well, it's so far back, and the people didn't know much as we know today. We've got all of our technology, we've got our smartphones, and we can Google kind of anything and everything, and so we're so much more advanced. I don't know about that. when the writer of Ruth writes a story, how he grips us in those first 5 verses with just kind of not using too many words. And then he uses a literary device, if you pay attention to it, and I didn't pay attention to it for years, and finally it was kind of pointed out to me that he makes sure that when we get to Ruth chapter 2, and we're not going to have time to read it, but in verses 2, verse 6, and verse 21, and just a few verses, he keeps repeating this line, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess. I don't want you to miss that Ruth is a Moabitess, Ruth is a Moabitess. And again, in our thinking, we're thinking, well, what's the big deal? Naomi's a Jew, and Ruth is a Moabitess. Maybe this might help us. Ruth, who comes from a country where the Taliban is. Ruth, who is from some people that have sometimes mercilessly killed other Jewish people. So that when a Jewish reader would read this book, and every time the author would remind you, yeah, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, it's kind of like a stick and a twist. You think you're the chosen people, but the story of the Bible is that all the Jewish people that God is working through, they're all broken, they're all broken, they're all broken. And when you deny that brokenness and think that somehow my brokenness isn't as bad as those brokenness, but in the Bible, God is saying, your brokenness, and here's a broken story too, and here's a broken story too, from outside of your people. Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess. God is going to be so good to Ruth the Moabitess that you will never forget this story. How so good God is to all people who realize that they're broken and want to follow Jesus. So we said we're going to just read through Ruth chapter 4 and kind of wrap up our message series on this amazing story of Ruth, and we'll come back again. I'm looking forward to some Mondays in September, just sitting down and reading the story and trying to tease out some more insights for us to read the Bible in a better way. So here's what we read. Meanwhile, Boaz, again, Boaz was the owner of these fields, and Ruth and Boaz are going to get connected. He went up to the town gate and sat there. When the kinsman redeemer, and we don't have time for that, but that ends up being one of these words, this combination of words that the author of Ruth puts in, and it's a huge concept. But the kinsman redeemer, something good in this broken story. He had mentioned, came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. And Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. There's going to be a legal transaction taking place here. That's what I want us to catch here. And so they did so. Then verse 3, then he said to the kinsman redeemer, again, we're going to hear that word over and over again. Don't forget, there's a kinsman redeemer thing happening here. Kinsman redeemer thing happening. Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, Naomi, again, she had wanted to change her name to Mara, but Boaz like, I'm not playing that game. You're not Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. Just brother in that broad sense. He's a Jewish man that used to be here among us. And then it says, I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you redeem it, do so, but if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to it except you, and I am next in line. The person said, I will redeem it. But there's more to the story. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, there it is again from the author. Don't forget. Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess. You acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. Again, we don't understand it, but they had all these legal things. It was something that was documented over and over and over again. They've been doing this for centuries. They'll be doing it for many more centuries to come. And at this, the kinsman redeemer, who was the first in line, the kinsman redeemer said, okay, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. And then we get this insight, and again, it looks so crazy to us because of our time in that. It says this, now in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. Some of you are really glad that we don't live in Bethlehem these days. But we think that, man, is this so strange? If we were to tell our story of a legal transaction in their day, we put a bunch of words on paper, and we put a line there, and we sign it. That's the system we've all agreed to. This is the system they agreed to. Long before there was paper, they were making a legal transaction with many witnesses around. And so the kinsman redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. So there you go, legal transaction. Verse 9, it says, then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chiliad, and Mahlon, so those the three men. I have also acquired, there it is again, Ruth the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that the name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today you are witnesses. Again, Mahlon was broken by death, but God is still so good here. Then the elders and all those at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord, and then it's going to get weird. We would think that somehow it wouldn't get weird, but it's going to get weird here. We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah. Can some of you know that's Jacob's wives? They're sisters. And there's all this contention. And we did a series on Joseph back in June. Joseph is the 11th of 12 brothers. So there's this blessing. Again, there's a brokenness to that story, but somehow God is so good through that story. That's why we're here, and we still remember the 12 sons of Jacob through Rachel and Leah, and then there's two other women involved with it. So again, he's saying, here's this, may they bless you, who together build up the house of Israel, and may you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Again, just this kind of a strange blessing. Bethlehem, we know who's really famous in Bethlehem. Yet before Jesus. Oh, they remember this story. And through the offspring, the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of, and it gets even weirder, of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Judah is the third born of Jacob, of the 12 sons. Judah is kind of the direct line to Jesus, even though he's the third son. The story that is referred to and say, may this blessing happen to you. Well, let's just say that Judah was father-in-law to Tamar. Kind of a broken story. But God is so good through all the brokenness. And then we read this. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. And then this scene. Oh, I love this scene. The author creates it so beautifully. The women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. And then this picture, just this picture. Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him, because a year and a half before this scene, she could have never seen it. And all of her brokenness, and all of her poverty, and all of her despair. And then we wrap it up, and it says this, and there's the women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Oh my, what a story. But then goes on, This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Abinadab. Abinadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz. Boaz the father of Obed. Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse the father of, the last word in the story of Ruth is David. Because God is so good. First 5 verses. Last word. How can but God be this good? Even knowing that David has such a broken story, but yet God is so good through this story. So Ruth, the Moabitess, she's broken. God is so good. Hey, when we read the Bible, when we get to the end of a story, sometimes you just kind of want to go on. Ruth was still broken. She died, right? Naomi died. Boaz died. We don't know in what order. There were still broken stories all around. The brokenness didn't stop with a beautiful ending to this story. God is so good. And so when Matthew starts his gospel, he kind of, again, if we read with eyes that get trained by the wonder of who this God is, that we're broken, but God is so good, God is so good, God is so good, he doesn't refrain from all the brokenness. So in Matthew chapter 1, the opening 6 verses, or some of those 6 verses, here's how Matthew begins his gospel about Jesus. The book of genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. And there's a woman that's in this line. And it goes on in verse 5, and Solomon the father of Boaz by Rahab. Rahab, we usually give her Rahab the prostitute, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and there's that Moabitess, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. And so there's 4 women in the direct line of Jesus that's mentioned by Matthew on purpose. Because Jesus comes from broken stories. But God is so good. Because if the broken stories are ever going to be beautiful, Jesus needs to be involved in it. So we all live broken stories. We all live broken stories. Again, sometimes we don't like to admit that. We don't like to think about that. We live in this culture where, let's fix it. Let's fix it. There are some things that are broken that no money, no technology, no medicine is ever going to fix. But God is so good. In the last song that we're going to sing these words, this imagery. Every seed buried in sorrow, you will call forth in its time. You are the Lord of the harvest, calling our hope now to arise out of brokenness. So after broken hearts, beautiful flower, an artist prayed and sat in front of a blank canvas and took her brushes and her colors and painted. Broken heart, beautiful flowers. So we are people who have broken hearts and beautiful flowers because of Jesus. So when I look at that painting and that picture, I'm going to think broken hearts, beautiful flowers, Jesus. Broken hearts, comma. Beautiful flowers, comma. Jesus. Period. Jesus. Jesus. We all live broken stories. God is so good.